All right, welcome everybody to the 17th Gardeners and Growers Workshop for the 10th of September 2017. And those that would like to learn more on the agriculture side, to join the weekly private agricultural teachings there. And the books, which are now also available somewhere on the internet to download. And I think if those that want to download it, then they can just make their donation to the foundation on what the books would have cost. Okay, today we'll have a presentation from Alex. He's got some very interesting pictures and work that he's going to go through and share with us. And then for the rest of the presentation, I'm going to go into a bit more detail on the amino acid formation on Earth, the importance of the hydrogen and helium and nitrogen, and then a bit of homework at the end, just to have a look at this concept called crown shyness in trees and to try and understand that one. So I'm going to hand it over to Alex.
So you're going to let me start off the show here, eh?
Yes, I'll let you start off the show.
Okay, well, I appreciate you giving me the time, and I appreciate you helping me out with the pictures there.
With pleasure.
So, and the sound quality is okay?
Yes, we can hear you well.
Okay, beautiful. So this picture here is showing a plasma water reactor. And the red caps there are forming a hexagonal shape. And inside the bottles of the red caps, I have CO2 GANs, copper GANs, and zinc GANs. And there'll be another slide later to show in more detail. Along the bottom of the reactor are individual bottles. I just put them on a little table. And the two aspects on the bottom row, there's bottles in the middle of the reactor. So there's room for about 7 bottles. The picture is showing 6 bottles in the middle of the reactor. So that's in between all the 6 red caps there. The hole in the middle is where I was running some testing, and I'll be showing those on the third slide. So we had bottles in the middle of the reactor and bottles from around the reactor. And so this is how I started out. And basically, as I started to remove the bottles from the middle of the reactor, then I'd progress the bottles from the outside towards the inside. And so I had to move the bottles along like little soldiers, and I did this manually. I thought I was going to get a tremendous amount of backlash over this thing because it just... what's been happening over the years with respect to this type of thing. And I really got a pleasant surprise. The results have been, the reception has been warm and encouraging, and it's picking up momentum. And so I had to graduate to actual individual boxes to cases. So these bottles come in cases of 24. And I had to figure out a way to do this. So I started stacking them on top, and it's a very crude way of doing it. But so in the middle row, I have 2 cases, and then on the top row, I have a 3rd case, and it actually acts as a reinforcement for the middle 2 cases. So I have this little precarious contraption on this small table, and it happens to be in the middle of a room that is 40 feet by 20 feet. So the whole area here is about 800 square feet. So, and then this is also turns out to be kind of significant. So in the, Jimmy, could I get to the second slide, please?
All right, Alex. Can I just ask
yes, sir.
a question on this one first? So you've got the different GANs. So what is the purpose of this? If you can just let me know with that one first.
Okay, so the 6 bottles in the middle are forming a field. So the positioning and the spacing of the bottles matters. So the red caps are forming a hexagonal formation, and there's a gap in between. So the red caps are negative, the gap is positive, and so it was my hope to create a field that would begin to rotate and to extend outwards. The inside the bottles, there is GANS, and then I added the distilled water to the GANS, and the distilled water obviously became plasmatic water. So water has a natural affinity for sharing this energy, and so the big problem that I had over here, the two problems. One was to, as you draw water from the, let's look at the second picture on the left a little bit better. Can we just focus on the left one? Is it possible?
What, to zoom that one in?
Yes. Okay, all right, no. Doesn't matter. Okay, your technology is better than mine, so we're going to go ahead with this.
Okay.
Okay, so what inside the bottles there is the GANS, and then I put the liquid in, and so that became a plasmatic liquid. So I was seeking a bottle that was tall and thin, so that way we would get a distinct separation of the GANS material from the fluid in there. And so we have been drawing water from the top of the bottle, and either using that as drinking, or as a topical agent, or for making GANS patches or whatever. But there's always the danger of losing the GANS material itself, and so I didn't want to lose that. I wanted to use these as the master reactor. The second problem is that I didn't want to have a residue in the bottom of the bottles. So the process was to actually take the water from the bottles and put that in the reactor, and then make the water inside the other bottles plasmatic through their nearness and proximity to this reactor. So the creation of the reactor and the configuration of the reactor, the two important points that I felt were important was not only the hexagonal shape, but the orientation and the gap, but then also the potential difference in the GANS material. So on the left-hand picture there, we're looking at 6 bottles, and from left to right, we number them 1 to 6. So bottles number 1, 3, and 5, these all have the same material in them, but the material is, and in the left-hand bottle actually, you can probably see a distinction that there seems to be a bottom layer and an upper layer. The upper layer is more blue than the bottom layer. The bottom layer is the zinc, the upper layer is the copper. And so we have, shall we say, large, medium, and small. And then in bottles number 2, 4, and 6, we have the carbon dioxide. And I've done the same thing, large, medium, and small. So the idea is to have a gradient to go from left to right. And so those bottles are arranged in sequence. And when you look at the reactor and you lay out the bottles, you start with 1 and put 2 and 3 and 4. So it's kind of like a camshaft on a car, and so these would be like the 6-cylinder. This is a 6-cylinder. So, and I did this arbitrarily insofar as the configuration is concerned. I actually really wanted to separate the zinc and the copper, but in my GANS making process, the two got put together, and between this, that, and the other, I settled down to two sets. So 1, 3, and 5 is one set, 2, 4, and 6 is a second set. I interchanged the 2 sets and put them in a circular fashion. And so then following up, an interesting problem happened in Ghana, where the minister was questioned whether or not the Keshe technology was valid. And so the answer was, well, just a simple pH test would kind of indicate something here. So this was a big breakthrough also for me, because at that point I started to do a pH test. So on the third picture on the right, what you're looking at is the actual pH test. So there are 4 rows from 5 in the top row and 2 in the bottom row. And the 2 in the bottom row, the colors indicate a pH of the water. So the blue, the product I'm using is phenolphthalein. And so the blue indicates a pH of 8, and the yellow indicates a pH of 6. 6 and 8 is 14, that's the pH scale. In between 6 and 8 is a green, a very green. And below 6 would be more orangey, and above 8 would be more on the purple side. So this is the color chart from this particular pH test that I was running. So the bottom 2 jars are actually the control samples. I was using a styrofoam cup. I was a little apprehensive because I was wondering if the styrofoam would somehow interfere with the reaction. So anyway, I didn't know. So what I did, on the back row, I took the, let's start on the back row with the 5 at the top there. The one on the left was the first one that I did. I put that smack dab in the middle of the reactor. And so that's the hole in the middle of the reactor, and I put it there. And so basically I started off with acidic water in the styrofoam cup, left it in the middle of the reactor for 24 hours, came back, and the pH went from 6 to 8. So I thought that was pretty amazing.
So that was just the plain, did you specifically make that water a pH of 6 before you put it in?
Yes, yes.
Okay, it's interesting, yeah.
I'm going to elaborate on that a little bit more. I dialed it in. I asked for a pH of 6. If I get 6 on one, I get 8 on the other. If I get 5 on one, I get 9 on the other. That type of thing, because the pH scale is always 14. So between the acid and the alkaline, there's always a division within the pH scale of 14. So this is definitively 6. But the big point here is that I started off with acidic water, and within 24 hours it became alkaline. And so the styrofoam cup in the top left-hand corner was the first one that I did, and I did one every single day after that. And so what you're looking at is a series of tests that I ran for about 11 days. So I repeated that test, and then the results it came out the same way. So then I took a pH test, and we're still on the back row, and I did the test outside of the reactor. So when we go back to the original picture, don't go just yet. I just want to say that there's inside the reactor, in the middle of the reactor, and then there's bottles on the outside of the reactor. So the right hand, the next 3 tests were all outside of the reactor, and they also turned. So then I had to start gathering up these bottles, so I put the styrofoam cups, I had to put them in a place, so I put them in another room, about 10 feet away from the reactor. And I said, well, let me see if I can repeat this 10 feet away. So the middle row that you're seeing, the 4 styrofoam cups there, were all actually put right next to the first test, 10 feet away from the reactor. And it took a little bit longer, but they also turned. They went from a pH of 6 to about a pH of 7.5. And then the next row, which is the third row there from the top, those 2 tests I did 20 feet away. That's the farthest I could go within the room. So the reactor's in the middle of the room. The room is 40 feet by 20 feet, so the reactor's in the middle of the room. So radius one way is 10 feet, the radius the other way is 20 feet. So those 2 were put 20 feet away, and it took a little bit longer, and they also turned. Now, I was going to throw this all away, and then I started to make the presentation. So I've kept the test results, And actually, probably what I should have done is sent you another picture, but a funny thing happened, and then someone asked me a question. I made this first presentation August the 14th, and someone asked me the question, how long will the water remain good for? And you know, once it's out of the reactor, how long will it retain its pH? And at that time, I never had a bottle that was more than 3 days old, because it started to go. The bottles were for drinking. So, to my consternation, I found some bottles buried in the car that had been there for about 3 weeks. So I did 2 tests on that, and one, I tested the pH, and it came out the same color as the control sample, which is a pH of 8. And then I also tasted the water, and anybody who's been drinking bottled water, you know that the bottled water has a funny taste. And it's a lot funnier now than what it used to be, because of the process that they use and how they make the bottles. And how they make the bottles is normally they inject air, hot air, into a plastic plug, which is put on top of a cavity, and then the plastic heats up and forms within the cavity, and that creates the shape of the bottle, and then the bottle goes over to the next station where it gets filled with water, and then they put a cap on it, put a label on it, and there you go, you've got your bottled water. But as we all know, this bottled water really is tap water, and just same tap water we get out of the tap. And so I've never been one for drinking water out of a bottle, so I've always looked for a way to take comprehensive control of my own drinking water, and so I was producing water using an ionizer, and that's what I've been doing for about 9 years now. So the ionizer that I use is a medical grade, and it's the only one that is medical grade, so this was an important factor for me. And so it can give me reliably the proper pH and the proper energy in the water and everything else. But the most important thing is that in this case, I was using it as a filter. So the process of making the bottles has changed. What they've done is now gone to, they skip a step. Instead of injecting hot air, they actually inject hot water that melts the plastic. It forms the bottle, and then they leave that water in the bottle and just put a cap on it, put a label on it. So they've improved their efficiency that way. But as we all know, that as the plastic is curing, the resins inside are migrating, and of course they're migrating into the water, and of course the water is picking up this, and that's where you get that funny bottled water taste. So this was, and so what I'm giving is just my opinion, okay? It's my opinion, and I reserve the right for my opinion. But I did not have a funny taste out of that water that was 3 weeks old. So that, I found that to be unusual. So anyway, the 2 reasons that I wanted to transfer the plasma energy from the 6 bottles into the plastic bottles is, number 1, I didn't want to lose my master GANS reactor. I didn't want to lose the GANS from my master reactor and have even slight particles transfer over. So I didn't want that to happen. And the second thing is, I didn't want any residue in the bottom of the drinking water bottles. So, Jim, can I go back to the original picture, please?
All right.
So I was getting these bottles in cases, and I learned how to cut the case open. So the idea is to remove the bottles from the cases and open the bottles, dump that water, dump the plastic water, and beautiful, thank you. So how I make this water, the plastic case, you'll notice on the middle row of cases that the case is actually open at the top. So I sliced that open in a very strategic way so I can remove the bottles from the cases, and then I had to learn how to repack them as well to preserve the integrity of the cases, because what had happened was I originally started giving out the bottles one at a time, and then people come and want next time 5 bottles, and then it was 10 bottles, and then finally they said, oh no, I want the whole case. So I actually had to change from making individual bottles to making cases of bottles, so I had to learn how to do that. And the process is to take an existing bottle, and you see some bottles there with labels on them, so I take that, I open the bottle, dump the water, I rinsed it out with a sterilizing water to flush out the plastic. Then I filled it up with the ionized water, put the cap back on, and took the label off, and then repacked them in the cases, and I put them in the reactor. So that's what you're seeing there. So this was the basic reactor that I was doing, and so there are 48 bottles in the bottom row, 48 bottles on the middle row, and 24 bottles on the top row. So there you are, roughly 100 bottles. I guess 116, no, 120 bottles in the reactor here. And that wasn't enough, because it took me about 24 hours roughly to make the water plasmatic. And so before I get into other questions, I don't want to deviate from that. At this point, I would like to proceed on some other observations. All the tests that I did in the styrofoam cups, I put 3 drops of phenolphthalein in there, so I tried to get a uniform test. It's not a scientific test. It was just, I made the acidic water, put it in the reactor, either put it in the middle, put it on the outside, put it 10 feet away or 20 feet away, and measured to see if I was getting any results. So as I mentioned, the pH test has been now sitting there. It's been over a month that they're sitting there, and all the jars are turning blue in terms of the pH. So all are migrating from 7.5 to 8. And the differences in color have to do with the chemistry of the water that's in the system. I am on a city system, so I'm at the mercy of the city and the chemicals that they throw in there. But basically, the water is very clean. When you look at the bottles and you can see the reflection inside the bottles, the only residue that I've seen in the bottles were small bubbles very tiny bubbles that came into the bottles that were there in the first few hours, and then they dissipated as well. So the water is very clean. There's no residue, not from the manufacturing, not from the water system, and not from the GAN. And that was the deal that I wanted to accomplish. And then as I say, it wasn't enough, so I had to put in more cases. I personally noticed that when I put the 5th case in the reactor, that I become more sensitive to this thing, because I felt the force field kind of hit me. And I actually, when I put the 5th case into the reactor, I kind of had to step back, because I could actually feel the field expanding. So I don't claim to be the most sensitive in terms of that, but I could really feel that. So what I had done since is I've had to increase the number of cases because of the demand, and so I went to about 7 cases. That wasn't enough. So the most that I got to was about 11 cases. And so an interesting thing happened was that with the 11 cases, that I could really feel a difference in the reactions. And so I decided to run pH tests and to see what would happen, and a little bit more controlled. So I ran the pH tests all over again, and with the 5 cases, I ran a pH test and I wanted to time it. I wanted to, you know, see what would happen. And I took a pH test, put it in the middle of the reactor, and checked the time. I couldn't exactly be there at the time that it turned, but I ran 3 tests, and all 3 came between 29 and 32 hours. So from the time I put the acid water inside the reactor, it took about 29 to 32 hours to change to a pH of 7.5. So I graduated up to 11 cases. So that's more than doubling the size of the number of bottles in there. And I let that stand for about 2 days. So now I'm no longer converting these bottles to plasma. They are already plasmatic water. So if it's been more than 32 hours, so my point is that the 11 bottles, after sitting there for 48 hours, have all become a plasmatic condition. So my point is that the 11 cases are now part of the reactor. So I ran the test again, and the time it took to turn from a pH of 6 to a pH of 7.5 dropped down to about 21 hours. So now we've had an indication and of how I can adjust the intensity. So I have new plans, and before I go into observations and where and why I did this, and if I have the time to do that, I would appreciate that. But are there any questions at this time?
Well, that is quite fascinating, Alex. So you've just created the flow in the 6 red bottles between the different gases.
Yes, and I must add, I arbitrarily choose, if you take your left hand and put it on top of the reactor and draw from the right to the left, so it's a counterclockwise spin, is in my mind what I imparted on that reactor.
Okay.
Yes, please.
Yeah. Okay. And then so you say that, you know, you put all your bottles around it, and then say 32 hours later, they all become plasmatic.
Correct.
And then so it increases the strength of your reactor.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
And then so the next pH test, obviously it was a lot quicker to change the water because you're dealing with a bigger mass or bigger reactor.
Yes, and I hadn't a chance to even test that, but you know, we just had the long weekend holiday. So this result that I'm telling you is as a result of the Labor Day holiday here we had at the beginning of September. So the bottles were sitting there for 2 days. So there was at least 48 hours. So you know, there's no doubt that it became plasmatic, and then that confirmed it with the pH test dropping from 29 hours to 21 hours.
Oh, that's fascinating. Now, one thing that came to my mind was you might find the change of this would be different if you found the correct position on Earth.
Oh, yes. The correct position was smack dab in the middle of the 800 square feet that I had, which is 40 by 20. Yeah.
But if we connect up this, find out this connection to a particular point on Earth, grid point on Earth, and you place these bottles on that point on Earth, on the ground, it will probably be a lot stronger.
I agree with that supposition totally. There are many ways and means that we can increase the strength of this, and so that's one of them, and I agree with that. The thing is that this is a type of reactor that anyone can put together wherever they are.
Now we're always looking at the spinning and all the mechanics of that, but we tend to forget that it all comes down to the fields, and if we can get the fields to rotate, you know, we might not see the rotation. The fields are rotating and they're doing that for us. That's fantastic.
Well, so an interesting point, and I brought this up at the reactor group, was that after hours, it kind of quiets down, and I had a chance to be in a very quiet situation, and I start to hear or feel a beat frequency. And when I measured it, I found that it was 80 cycles per minute. And then I measured my heart rate, and it was 60 cycles per minute. So it wasn't my heart. Was it cross-referencing to my heart? I don't know that. What I do know is that the beat frequency that I was hearing was about 80 cycles per minute, and I just wanted to mention that because that indicates a rotation.
Yes, funny enough, you brought that beating up is because which means that reactor you've got there is creating a pulse.
Right.
Because we had built another sort of health unit, and we had one of our friends come around who's a healer, and he comes and he stands next to the unit, and he's got his hands and he's feeling, and then he turns to us and he says, "Oh, this thing's got a pulse." It's beating. So yes, I think if we get that flow going correctly, then we're creating the pulse, the beat, like the heartbeat.
Well, we did not, you and I did not plan this presentation, so you've just fallen into the trap there, Jim, really brilliantly. I have had 5 energy healers come to see this, and they've all felt the energy. The last one that just came in actually knew how to use a pendulum, and she knew how to use dowsing rods. When I say she knew, she wasn't as qualified as Klaus is, but qualified enough to come up with some kind of effect, noticing some kind of effect. So what was interesting, a lady came in, and she was very sick. There's no question about it. But when people get very sick, they get on a disability pension, and that becomes a very attractive feature for them. So they're more interested in keeping that disability pension than they are in getting well. And plus, of course, they get a lot of sympathy. And this is something that I wasn't brought up with this attitude, and I need to comment on that only insofar as I don't understand it, I don't agree with it. When you aspire for things, you always aspire up. You don't aspire down. No one works hard to be incompetent. Well, if they're making sense. Anyway, so I offered her the plasma water, and I knew she was very, very sick. And the look on her face was shock, because it almost as if I told her the worst possible thing. And she kind of put this look on her face and a look in her eye, and it was very scary. And then she walked out, and as she walked out right past the energy healer that it was just coming in. And I asked her if she noticed what happened, and she says, yeah, something really strange happened. And she says, I'm going to go get my dowsing rod, and I'm going to check it. So she went outside, and as she was coming back inside, the dowsing rods went kind of crazy, and they refused to come in. They just whipped right out of the office. And we arrived at the conclusion was at that point that the dowsing rods were following the bad energy that was leaving the store. And that took about 60 seconds. And then the dowsing rods calmed down. And then we could actually feel a calming down within that. So I've had that comment numerous times where people would come in and they would notice, they don't know what's going on, but they would notice a certain calmness in the store. And so anyway, she came in with the dowsing rods and came right up to the reactor, and she found that the dowsing rods operated properly, in her mind anyway. So she also had a pendulum, So interesting. So we tried with the pendulum, and we asked it a couple of questions, and then two of the most important questions for me was, did I set up the configuration properly? Excuse me. Did I set up the configuration properly within the reactor? And the answer was yes. The second question I wanted to know was, did I pick the right rotation, the counterclockwise rotation? Was that correct? And the answer was yes. So I had a really nice confirmation there as well. I had another energy healer come, and they actually did. The parking is in front of the building, and so that's at least another 20 feet away, and that particular energy healer was extremely sensitive, and she said that she felt it in the parking lot. She said she came for a visit, and she knew something was up right away as she parked her car. And then when she came in, she kind of snuck around, and she was wondering where all this is coming. And when she seen the reactor, she knew that there was a lot of energy coming from the reactor. And at that point, I only had 5 cases in the reactor. But I wanted to demonstrate the GaNs material in the bottle, so I shook the bottle, and apparently I shook her up at the same time. So I've been reluctant to shake the GaNs in the bottle ever since. So I like to leave the GaNs in the bottle and leave it where it is, and just basically, if I'm taking individual bottles, I draw from the middle, and then I graduate the bottles from the outside into the middle, and I rotate the bottles that way, and I do the same thing with the cases. This particular case is up against the wall. There's steel studding in the wall. There's electrical wiring in there, and the only way that I could add the cases is to the front. And so what I'm wondering is if, you know, maybe the reactor itself is kind of offset. You know, there's a lot of emphasis on the water at the front of the reactor, and I'm wondering if that's what's causing the beat frequency. But I think you're right in your observation, and I'm making the same observation, that there is a beat frequency that's coming out of the reactor. And so the conclusion that I would like to make is that, number one, there is a reaction. Number two is that the longer the unit operates, the stronger it gets. Number three, the more bottles in the reactor, the stronger the reactor gets. The longer more bottles are in the reactor, the stronger it gets. So now you know where we're going. So I have plans for a new reactor.
You're going to create your own water world park.
I'm sorry, could you repeat that, please?
You'll create your own water world park.
Well, yeah, but everyone can do that, you see.
Yeah.
So
I think you need to use big 5-liter. I don't know what that is in Canadian sizes.
No, these are half-liter bottles.
Yes, so I think you need to make ones with big, giant 5-liter.
Well, I agree. I was looking for a particular shape on this bottle, so this bottle came with some tomato sauce, and so I had to like a lot of tomato sauce. That's where I got these bottles from. But I was looking for
seen giant ones like that, Alex. I've seen people make big, giant ones like that somewhere. Maybe
well,
you need to go to Costco or something.
Well, certainly, we can certainly modify that. I know that you were using a big bottle in your hydroponic system, and you were mentioning something like 1 gallon of GaNs, or what were the numbers? You had 21,000 liters in your system.
Yes, just with the one bottle. Yeah.
Yes. So you had flow, and it was there all the time.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I don't have that in this system. So this is a very stationary system. So there's no flow here per se. So now, how I got from here to there, what I did in the first place is before I put the reactor together, I was just testing out the GaNs I was trying to do something here. One of the things is that we know that the zinc GaNs helps with the emotional settings. And I don't know how you're reacting, but you know, for me, I've been doing this for quite a while, and I find sometimes it's very difficult to deal with people. Not because I don't like people, I just it's an attitude sometimes that we have. So, you know, let's say matter state attitude, if you will, and not open-minded, not progressive, and not open to new innovations and things like that. So, you know, once you get into the plasmatic technology, it's a little bit like being pregnant. You know, there's no halfway about it. You know, once you know about this, you can't unknow about this. So then I found that there's a resistance. So the two types of resistance. So the lady that I described doesn't want to know, okay, because that would upset her tiny little perfect world. And then there's other people who don't understand it. But you know, one of my good friends, he's a truck driver. And the only thing that I want to mention about that is that he is not of a scientific mind, okay? And he doesn't make any pretense about that. He's a truck driver, and he's proud of it, and he should be, because he's very good at what he does, and he's become a very, very good friend. And I showed him the pH test. I took him 20 feet away. I showed him the styrofoam cup. I showed him the before and after, and he understood the acid alkaline and all that. And he stands back at the reactor and he looks and he says, yeah, and you did that without any wire connections. Okay, so he was able to see the difference and get it. All right, so that's a very welcoming thing. And so with those type of people that, you know, I find more agreement with. But when people come in and they start to, you know, say stupid things like, you know, what I'm really, really happy about is simultaneously to doing all these pH tests and doing the intensity tests and all that, a guy comes out on the internet and he says, oh, you know, I bought a Keshe plasma reactor for making CO2, and I spent $1,000 on testing it, and it's bunk. It doesn't work. And I thought to myself, I'm 30 minutes away from one of the finest laboratories in the province, and that test would be $140. So the first thing I thought, my God, you got ripped off. And, you know, how did you arrive at that conclusion? And then when I look at the pH test that I was using, and that's an $8 test, and obviously it does work. So I really have to wonder about the quality of his lab, and I have to wonder if he spent $50 on buying a reactor and $1,000 on debunking it. You know, that's like buying a $10,000 car and spending $200,000 confirming that it can't get you to the grocery store. That's just so stupid, you know. And you know, so this timing of the test, the 11 tests that I did there, were at the same time that I seen this on YouTube, and I thought, my God, you know, for less than $8, I proved him wrong. So, you know, and my friend, the truck driver, gets it. And the interesting thing is that I started out giving a bottle here and a bottle there, and then they come back and they want 5 bottles, then they want 10 bottles, then they want a case. And then, you know, one day, 3 cases went out the door, and, you know, the energy went out. And so I started to realize at that point in time that I don't have enough. I need to get more cases in, and I need to prepare at least 24 hours in advance, and how long does it take? So just between unscientifically, I know from what people have talked about, what Mr. Keshe has talked about, or Arizona and other people, that we can do this in 6 hours. So that was not really the goal here. The goal here was whatever it took, get the water into a plasmatic state and get it into the people. So one of the keys to the design is that it was very strong in zinc. Now, I had the first reaction, I had a bottle. May I carry on, Jim? Are you okay?
Yeah, please carry on, Alex.
Okay. I had
one question for you.
Yes?
Was, how did it change you?
Oh my God, Jim, you're just terrific. Well, this was my next point.
Okay.
I was having trouble. I was having trouble with people because you know, I have this reactors, the zinc is affecting me, and I wanted to see how it affected me, and I thought, you know, maybe it would improve my attitude because I have a bad attitude. So I took a zinc bottle, and it is actually at my feet right now. I keep it right next to the computer. I just keep one bottle, and it is strong on the zinc. It has the zinc and the copper in it, and I needed the copper because of the antiseptic capabilities of it. That was the intent there. But the zinc primarily, it's very heavy on the zinc side to affect the emotional state. My own opinion with respect to the population here, not only, like every center has a drug problem, but we have a lot of seniors here, and they are overly medicated. I think that the number is running over 85% of the seniors are medicated and over medicated. So I see that as an emotional problem. And so strong in the zinc, and I tried that for a week with one bottle, and I found that it was helping me personally. So, but my reaction with other people was not helping. I was actually having problems with dealing with other people. So I've had to have an attitude adjustment on how to cope with that. So I designed a system where I took the plasma water and I put it in small bottles. And so one bottle, say for argument's sake, is 100 milliliters, and another bottle is 50 milliliters. And I put it in my bed, and I found that I could sleep like a baby. I put the big bottle at the feet and the small bottle at the head, and I could sleep 7-8 hours without a break, and that for me was a huge deal. And so I tried that with other people, and you know, there are people who are taking sleeping pills and other things, Valium or whatever, for stress relief or whatever. And they started doing the same thing, and they started seeing the same results. So all of that was quite cool. And so then I found that within my immediate friends and people who were using this particular technique, that we were getting along a lot better. So the big difference is the people who are not open to this, you know, there's still a little stress or friction there. So, you know, it's a matter of making an attitude adjustment and just working better with these people and just trying to bring them along a little bit. But I had one customer come in, and I had just for samples, I had some CH3 and some hydrogen GaNs and some zinc GaNs and copper GaNs in different bottles. And he says, "Oh, look at the pretty colors." And he says, "Oh, you know, I'm feeling some energy from these bottles." And he says, "Oh, you know, I'm very stressed out." And he says, "I'm feeling a calmness." And he goes and he grabs the zinc bottle, and he says, "Oh yeah, this bottle is giving me the most calmness." And he starts hugging the bottle, and he says, "Oh, you know, this is what I need. I need this to calm me down." You know, no prompting on I never said a word. I just watched him go through these machinations, and you know, he just grabbed the zinc bottle, and I thought, you know, here we go. You know, he picked the right bottle. So what I'm doing from here on is basically going into my opinion, and I made a presentation to the public testimonials with respect to health. Do you want me to elaborate a little bit on that?
What I just wanted to ask you, Alex, is did you find that taking the zinc brought up some anger issues?
Yes.
Okay, I'm finding this with everybody that are initiating the breathing units as well.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot, some of the people that have used our health unit.
Right.
So my feeling on this is that what is happening is that the zinc allows for the clearing out. But, you know, if we are sort of awake and aware people, we've done some work on ourselves over the years. And things like sadness and unhappiness, or whatever you want to call it, or grief, are ones that one can work through because they're more shallow rooted. Whereas anger is something we've been taught is not good and must never be shown. So it's one of the very deep-seated things. So I think that it's the deepest sort of negative emotion. And I think this is what it's helping people to work and bring it out. So, you know, what I'm seeing is that one just has to work through it and carry on. And eventually then you've worked through all your demons, it passes.
Well, you're 100% right in that. I arrived at that same conclusion, and then, you know, you have to arrive at that conclusion because, you know, we all have these issues here because we're living on this planet, and, you know, if we're sensitive to our surroundings, then this is prevalent in our surroundings all over the place. So, and every time someone else comes in and they have their own demons and they start to share that with you, and there's an interaction. So what can we do to mitigate that? And so what I'm seeing is that by having this field working stronger and stronger, the moment they come in, even if they're walking 20 feet, I can see the change on their face. And so that's working out. So I won't say that the anger is suppressed. I'll say that the anger is dissipated more. And, you know, it's not a subject to dwell on. It's just, you know, you feel it and you move on from there, like you said, and just have an attitude adjustment. And but the thing is that it's like, let's say you want to go on a trip, you know, and nobody else wants to go on the trip with you, and then, you know, it's kind of disconcerting and say, well, you know, we're going to go on the beach, and, you know, we're in a cold climate, we're going to go to a warm climate and enjoy ourselves. And no, we don't want to go. And it's, you know, that causes friction and anger. And that's somehow I'm using that as a comparison with respect to the plasma technology. You know, here we are buried in our matter state physicality, and you know, now we're becoming aware of a plasmatic capability. And what I've had to do personally, and I'm pretty sure everybody had to do that, is to reassess their position now with this new information. You know, everybody does what they can with the best that they know. But when that information changes, then the question is, how do you change? And do you change? And if you're in a comfort zone, and no, I don't want to change. Well, you know, why don't you want to change? Well, because I'm in a comfort zone and I like where I am, and, you know, but, you know, maybe we can do it better. Maybe we can explore better. And there's no question about it. I mean, since I put the reactor in, everything is better, and things are coming better, and it's attracting. I can, as a general conclusion, I can say it's attracting the kind of things that I want to attract.
You realize, Alex, that everything, you know, yes, your reactor is a field generator, but in a sense, your thoughts are fields too. Right. And so by gaining information, you are changing the strength of you.
Right. Yes.
So you need to reposition yourself according to the new information, because that's what reactors and souls do.
Exactly.
So there we go.
Exactly. So I do have some information to add to that. As far as I'm concerned personally, I have found a greater centering, and I don't know how to, you know, describe that in English better, but I have felt a centering within me personally, and a stabilizing effect within me personally. I mean, I consider myself a very stable person regardless, and that's my opinion. But, you know, I have felt that, you know, when people pull you away in 150 different directions, and, you know, you have to be strong enough not only to withstand that, but to, you know, understand, you know, where your foundation is and where you're at. And this is part of a healing process. And I've had to go through a healing process for a variety of reasons, personal reasons or whatever. And so one of the reasons that I never went into making it has been one of the contributing reasons. There's a few reasons, but one of the contributing reasons why I've never made a MagRav unit. I've wanted to. I started them, but I never finished them, was because we kept progressing. And in all these cases, regardless whether it's a MagRav or this kind of reactor or whatever, it is not of the same kind of reactor that we have within our soul. And so I've been trying to personally get better at that. And I kind of got to my level of incompetence at that point, and then a few things started to happen which forced me to go into this thing. So one was the anger issue. Two was the fact that I knew that the GANs and the transfer of the fields, I mean, I've understood this for a long time, so I was looking for a way to practice that. So by creating the GANS reactor with the red caps there, and then transferring the field to the bottles, then that does a verification of, or that is a, how shall we say, that's a practical application of the science behind it, and it works. And this is what I want to say. It's not me talking, it's everybody else talking. I mean, I have people coming in, strangers coming in, and you know, demanding a case of water because they have a particular need in mind. And so that has been tremendously gratifying. So, and that's what I've been focusing on. And so it's created a very positive atmosphere all the way around. And I've had many comments where people have commented on, they don't even know the reactors in the room, and they just kind of comment and say, you know, there's good vibes here and all that. And that's the intent that I want to create. And so I've been very successful with that. So I've been successful with the fact that I've been more centered and I've been healing. I'm still not satisfied because of the rate of time. That's one thing that I'm looking at. So I'm going to have to do some other things because my skill level is not up there yet. I don't feel that I've gotten to the point where I'm as sensitive or as good or qualified as an energy healer or so-called energy healer. Anyway, we all can graduate. So the fact of the matter is, we know it exists. So you know, you can't go somewhere if you don't know where you're going. And you know, once you decide where you're going, then you can get on the path and get going there. So that much I've been able to determine, and so I've been able to measure my progress as I've been going along. And you know, I've seen the progress, and so that's a confirmation. What I really wanted to show with the pH test there is that this is not voodoo science. This is the real deal. And just you know, to say, oh, you know, the pH went from 6 to 7.5. It's no big deal. Really? Try it. See what it takes to do it. And if you know, and if you can do it, well, God bless you. But you know, it's like love. You know, science is always, you know, downplayed the love because they can't measure it, you know, so it doesn't exist. Well, you know, so we never talked about the plasma technology because it doesn't exist. Well, how do you change the pH from yellow? All those jars that you're looking at there, all the styrofoam cups there, they're way closer to blue. The back row is as blue as the control blue that you're seeing in the bottom row. The bottom row test there, that's a pH of 8, and all of the one on the back row are in that color, and all the ones in the front row, there's nothing under 7.5, nothing in the green range. Everything is from a lighter blue to a dark blue. You know, how do you do that? And that is all done without smoke and mirrors and no magic tricks and no wires. And it's gone through walls with electrical wires and steel studding, and but the roof is made of steel. So these are all electrical conducting type things. I have Wi-Fi here and all the other electromagnetic interference, and it is doing that. So how does it do that? So you either acknowledge that it works, or you have to just watch the train go by. So that's where we're at, so the other two things that I would like to discuss today, if I have the time, is to go through the other pictures, and also to discuss the whys and wherefores I've gotten into this. Can we do that?
Yeah. The other thing that came to mind was that reactor there. What if you created 3 of those in your area?
Oh my God. Oh, yes, absolutely. Well, have you been following Jackie Fig and what she's been doing?
No.
Well, okay. So the interesting thing, and what I wanted to confirm, was one of the things we were talking about, road rage, and how she put a MagRev reactor in the car. And then she measured the field, and she got between 20 and 30 feet away from the car. So that means when you're stuck in a big city in heavy traffic, that you're affecting all the cars around you. And then this is a good thing, because everybody around you needs to be calmed down when they're stuck in traffic for 45 minutes. And it's hot outside, and then everybody's cranky, they want to go home and have supper or whatever. So this is a way to stop with road rage. But So this reactor is kind of doing the same thing. So and I've confirmed that with the sleeping units. And then the other thing that what she's done is she's made GANs with GANs, so what I call it, like what they call double GANs, and she's found that the reactor went from 20 feet or 30 feet up to around 200 feet from that, and she was using a pendulum to test that. So then she went to do a triple GANs, and like a triple dry, like a triple distilled whiskey or whatever. And she had to get in her car because it went 5.25 miles. So yeah, I thought about putting 3 reactors in there, and so I need the physical space to do that. But I did try this other experiment. This is my peace pond. And what you're looking at, standing there at the front, looking to the bushes there, that's about 75 feet. And then there's a second pond right behind that. The 2 ponds are connected. So you're looking about 150 feet, or say 50 meters. And it's about 50 feet wide, so say about 20 meters. Anyway, pretty big pond. And, what I wanted to do was to throw gallons and gallons of plasma water in here and see what the difference was. But what I was able to achieve, the water in here is about 4 feet deep. So what I was able to achieve was during the summer, I was adding a bottle of plasma water to the water. And I was trying to do that twice a day, at least once a day. So 500 milliliter bottle, 2 bottles would be 1 liter. So ideally add 1 liter of plasma water every day for a month. And I was doing this while we were doing the peace process. And that was through the month of July when we were trying to put that forward. And so I did notice the change in the water. So that small quantity of water added to this, and then continuing to add to that. Other people have commented that they've added plasma water to their bathing water or whatever, and it's made the water kind of silky, and I can corroborate that as well. So the water feels different, and it looks different, it feels different, it's absolutely clear. And the 2 main plants that are in the water, actually there's three plants in the water. That there's hornwort, which is submerged. The tall, thin plants there, those are rushes, and they're about 9 feet tall, which I thought was on the large size. And then the floating plants in the middle are water hyacinths, and that's one of my specialties, the water hyacinths. And then I also did actually go into the pond to check it out. And you know, I have a lot of frogs, so frogs are kind of the canaries in the mine shaft, and it means that the water is good and everything. And as I would put the water into the pond, I would open up a bottle and sprinkle the water along the surface and put it in a circle. And I'd actually stop on the north end and say, peace around the world, all the way around, and then face to the south, pour some water in, say, peace to the world, all around the world. Face to the west, and then repeat, and then face to the east, and empty out the bottle, and say, peace around the world, all around. And I would try and do that in an ideal situation, if I could do that, you know, twice a day, and then some days I missed. But I could safely say that I got in the month of July, I did that at least 50, 60 times. I found this to be not only important for the pond and everything around the pond, but it was very beneficial for me. Excuse me, it helped me with the centering and everything that I was talking about. And interestingly enough, I could actually, and again, personal opinion, you know, I could feel that the whole pond was turning into a plasmatic condition. And then, and I felt that this was one of my strong contributions with respect to the peace process. And I sent a few other pictures on some plants there, and I wonder if we could go to those, please.
Coming through. But it's a nice idea, Alex, for the pond, because those are the simple things that people can do. You know, we always think, well, what can we do to change? You know, and yeah, those are the simple things.
Oh my God, what a beautiful slide! This came out really good, really nice, Jim. Again, my own personal observations and what I was trying to, what's happened since I put the cases in the reactor. There has been a change. These plants I've been growing for years. So the one on the left is a peace lily, and it's really hard to judge, but that white leaf there is the size of a hand. It's huge, and the seed bud there is massive. I have grown plants like that for I don't know, 15 years, and I had never had a leaf that big, and that's what I'm commenting on. And right behind that is another leaf that is just unfurled, and so the flower is bigger than that leaf, but that leaf will grow to be about 4 times bigger than the flower, and I'm getting a new leaf almost shooting up every week. The slide in the middle is golden pothos, and again, I mean, that's the proper color of the plant. But what it really caught me off guard, what I did was I put a cutting into an aquarium, and the thing's just taken off. And the color is very yellow. It's a very yellow, yellow variegated color, and the green is almost an emerald green. It's a very nice green, a very warm and friendly green for a golden pothos. An older golden pothos becomes a dark green, and it doesn't have the distinction in the variegation. The variegation kind of leaves the plant. I don't know why, but 2 comments I want to make. The size of the leaf, I think it's quite large compared to what I have been growing in the past, and the number of new leaves growing and the rate at which they've been growing. I wanted to comment on that. On the one on the right, that's a Cypress alternifolius, in the foreground. That's a money tree in the background. The foreground is what I want to draw attention to. The bottom 2 stems, the head of those 2 stems, where you have the frilly part sticking out, that's a normal size there in the ones on the right-hand side. So those are older stems. The ones in the middle, the crown there is massive. Yeah, the one that you just circled, that's the older one. And the one in the middle is the newer one. And you're circling that one right now. That is massive. I've never had them that big. This is a cypress. The head on this thing is almost the same as an Egyptian papyrus. And the Egyptian papyrus is a tall plant. This plant, what you're looking at here, is you know, maximum 2 feet tall. So, you know, to have that kind of head, individually, it's no big deal. But when I look at these 3 plants, and all of them are 20 feet away from the reactor, I've been growing these plants for years, and for me, my own observation is the leaves are bigger, the plant is bigger, the rate of growth is faster, and like almost like as far as a seed pod on the peace lily on the left-hand side, that is almost double in size. Now, you know, I'm not the best gardener in the world, although I'm in the business. That doesn't mean anything. The thing is that I'm just saying from my own personal observations that this kind of caught me by surprise, and that's why I just sent the pictures to you, because, you know, we've had summer here for well, since May, and here we are. I took these pictures in September, and I have not had this kind of growth in April, May, June, or July, but in August and September, this is like kicked into a different gear. So the whole episode, the whole presentation that I'm putting on here started out on April the 18th. With respect to the launching of the scientific findings from the University of Tokyo. And I would just like to discuss that briefly, or if you feel that that's not appropriate for this presentation, what would your suggestion be?
One, Alex, yeah.
Leave that one?
Yeah.
Okay. So I don't know if you find that fascinating at all, if you're finding my conclusions here of any relevance.
What you're bringing up is what we found, and what we try and explain to a lot of other people is when you're dealing with the ganses and the fields with agriculture, and it's so difficult to do very scientific experiments and to compare. And you know, what you've just brought up here was, you know, for the last 10, 15 years, you've seen something grow a certain way,
right?
And now it starts growing somewhere different. So yes, these observations are very true and very valid. And this is the only way that we are able to show the effects of what these fields are having on the plants is just by comparison to what we know.
Oh, and then please remember, I have grown these plants indoors and outdoors. So, you know, they're indoors. I have a limited amount of sunshine. They are a couple of feet away from the window, but I've had sunshine like all year round, and I grow these plants all year round. I have never had this kind of growth.
Yeah, we have to be very acutely aware of our surroundings when we start using this plasma, and very observant on how things are growing, how they're changing. Because things can be very subtle, you know, and if you're not careful enough, you can say, oh, well, this stuff doesn't work, but you could miss a lot of subtle changes that you'll see in the plants and yourself. So fantastic.
The big difference is that when I went from 5 cases to 11 cases, you know, that was a huge step up. And so a lot of the things, like you say, that are subtle and you don't kind of notice them, they start to slap you in the face, you know, and you say, hey, you know, this is happening, this is here, and what is the cause and the effect, and so you can minus it and see how you feel, and then you can add to it and see how you feel, and you know how we feel is absolutely very, very important, because we ourselves are as a plasmatic condition. And, you know, unfortunately, science doesn't recognize that, and because they are looking for verification and validation through man-made means, you know, so your observation is meaningless. Well, you know, I'm just showing the pictures. This is my opinion, and I'm seeing some results, and so, you know, take it or leave it, and then it's up to me to do the same thing. And frankly, I'm taking it, and I'm going to run with this, because to me, that golden pathos in the middle is saying, you know, I'm really happy. That to me, that's a color that says I'm happy. And, you know, we've seen the singing plant last time, and, you know, that's a happy plant.
Yeah, thanks, Alex. Are there anybody else with questions for Alex? No questions for Alex. I just want to add, Alex, that, hello?
Yes, sir.
I just want to add that it's so nice to see, because how simple it is that you've created this reactor, and it's something so simple that every single one of us can create in our house tomorrow.
Right. There you go.
And we don't need to have mechanical parts, or even be, you know, create something. Just a couple of bottles, put them in position, and there you go, you know, and we start changing our environment.
But I think we have to start really concentrating on, as you say, that difference in the 6 bottles and the configuration that you created. You know, we are finding this in our agricultural experiments, and even in some of the health stuff that we've done, is that one has to be mindful of the shape you're creating and the flow you're creating, and each shape creates a different flow, and then more creates flow between things. And so we have to start really playing with the configurations to get that flow. And yes, I think you were correct in your bottle choice and your amount of bottles. And I think that the reason you're getting your pulse as well is because you've got a mixture of ganses. It's not just one type of gans, you've got the 3 different types of ganses, because I had an energy healer also go through all my ganses and feel them and tell me what she felt. And the one where she distinctively had a pulse just in the bottle of gans itself was, it was a mixture of gold, silver, and carbon gans, all 3 together. And that one had a pulse all on its own in the bottle, whereas the others just had different feelings to them, but they were all individualized ganses. So I think because you've created this flow with your 3 different kinds of ganses, and between the bottles, that's what's given you your pulse and your flow so nicely.
I would have ideally wanted to have 3 sets of 2 bottles, but in my production, that didn't work out, and at least I got 2 different bottles. I don't think I would have got the same reaction as having everything in the 1 bottle with this. The rotation of the field and the flow there is absolutely important, because I could detect a difference in terms of how fast the bottles were becoming more plasmatic. So, you know, the first conclusion was that the longer the reactor worked, the stronger it got. That was a big revelation. So, separate from more bottles in the reactor, the stronger it got, right?
Thanks, Alex.
thank you very much for letting me make this presentation. I just do want to put my 2 cents in here with respect to what the two of you are doing, and I'm so impressed with the depth of your insight, Lisa. It's right off the charts, and I'm really grateful for everything that you do. And I can't give you anything more than the utmost encouragement to continue doing this, and to look forward, and collectively we want to give you as much strength as possible to continue to do this, because I don't think people are really understanding the importance of your work, and I greatly appreciate it.
Thanks, Alex, but the same can be said for you, you know, with the work that you've been doing just on the simple reactor and the effects that you've seen is profound, and can have huge impacts and consequences around the world if people just follow the simple steps. So that we're all just trying to do our little part, but together we will create something better. So that's the whole point.
Right. Thank you so much.
Okay.
May I ask a question now?
Yes, go ahead.
So Alex, you mentioned that you found that the longer the reactor were, the more it worked. Have you done this test with the same amount of water? So you had the water, for example, in a ball or a low wide bottle and a long thin bottle with the same amount, and see it was stronger when it was elongated?
I don't know that the size of the bottle or the shape of the bottle affects the field so much, because there's a reaction between the GaNs and the plasma water. The original intent of the bottle was so that it would facilitate the creation of the reactor itself, because the reactor bottles are similar in size to the other 500 milliliter bottles, so that there's a practicality aspect to it. I don't think the energy, though, is affected by the shape of the bottle so much. The positioning of the bottles was really important insofar as the hexagonal shape, as Lisa was mentioning. It's you know, I borrowed that from a daisy. There's no this is natural in the plant kingdom. The gap between the bottles is also important. So there's a proportion of the position of the bottle and the gap between them. So there's a what do you call it? Symmetry, a symmetry that comes in there. So the positive negative aspect of the charge flow is absolutely important, and that's what helps with respect to the rotation of the field. So the gap between the bottles is just as important as the position of the bottles. When we were talking about going to bigger bottles, there's no doubt in my mind that, you know, if you put more GaNs in bigger bottles, that you're going to get a bigger field. Have I been able to do any kind of scientific testing? No, I haven't. So this is all based on my opinion and my experience on what's been happening, and I don't have the equipment to do the proper testing for that. So this was not designed to be a scientific experiment. This was more, I had to do something for not only myself but the people around me, and I'm so pleased to report that I've had tremendous support. I've not had the backlash that I thought I would have. It's gone the other way, and it's just that the momentum is carrying it that way. So my attitude, the people who are taking the water, their attitude has also contributed. to the energy field within the bottle, within the plasma reactor. So the shall we say the positive aspects that continue to flow into it have made the reactor stronger. That has had a significant effect. Am I answering your question, Eric?
Yes, and all your talk about scientific, we know what science is about in the modern world, so what you sense about the fields is just as valuable or even more valuable than some scientists stating something, because it's how it works on us that is important, not how it works on a mechanical device of some kind.
Well,
So,
I think people wouldn't come back and get more water if there wasn't an effect on them. You know, so they're nowhere near as scientific as I am. I've had scientific training, and so I have a huge advantage over them. So, you know, I'm not approaching it from a scientific standpoint. If they ask me, you know, I tell them, and then they kind of regret asking me because it's beyond their education and their exposure. It's just, this is not what we're taught in school. Okay, so this is a whole new viewpoint, and to say that what I've had to come down to is say, look, you're made of water. You're 75% water, so the quality of the water matters. But you're not the water that's coming out of the tap. The tap water is of a matter state. You know, so we're elevating it to a higher state, and one of the descriptions that I've been using is, say, to go from you know, when we increase the energy of the water, say you're on the ground floor and you increase the energy, well, you're kind of going towards the ceiling. But, you know, when you take that source of energy away, you know, you come back down to the ground floor. But when you go into a plasmatic state, you've actually gone all the way up the steps to the next floor, and you don't come back down to the ground floor. Now you're in a plasmatic state. And somehow that example has come home. You know, they understand, yeah, if I go from one floor to the next floor, I don't have to worry about falling through that upper floor to get back down to the ground floor. And yeah, you know, you are higher. So, and floor by floor by floor, we keep going higher. So there's the progression to the nano, the GANs, the plasma field, and then, you know, right on to the soul level. So once they start to see that progression, then they kind of accept that. And then, you know what, just drink the water, and you tell me. And, you know, they said, like I had the gentleman just the other day, what he said, oh, you know, I was feeling very lethargic, and now I'm feeling a little hyper. Is like, is that possible? Is it possible just to have a little sip, and then within a matter of an hour, just to feel this change in energy? Well, yeah, obviously it is possible. So now, you know, a belief system starts to set in with him. And I'm not saying anything. I'm not, you know, I'm not a legal attorney there trying to convince him that, you know, blue is black. It's, you know, he's drinking the water and he's feeling the difference, and he's happy. And that's what I want. I want to make people happy. I mean, we deserve to be happy. You know.
yes, you also mentioned that people with problems sleeping, that you used 50 and 100 milliliter bottles under the bed.
The 2-to-1 ratio was the key.
Yeah, and is that something you have experimented to find the 2-to-1 ratio, or?
If you're asking me about the effect of the gradient, I would think the larger the gradient, the larger the field. But the whole purpose of it was to create an infinity loop in the bed. So, you know, for my idea, and again, that's open to discussion, is that the field goes from the head to the extremities. So I wanted to return that field from the extremities back to the head. So I put the larger bottle at the feet and the smaller bottle at the head. And as far as I'm concerned, I'm right, because I would have to get up 2-3 times in the night, you know, to go to the washroom or whatever, and I don't have to do that anymore. I can sleep all night, and you know, sleep is part of our process here, and I need a good night's sleep, and it has made a huge impact, but not just for me, but for a lot of people. And you know, the fact that they went off their sleeping pills and their Valium, I mean, that's their decision. That is something they're adults and they can make adult decisions. So, you know, that's what they're telling me. And, you know, they want that for themselves. They want it for their sister. They want it for their mother-in-law. They want it for their neighbor. And they come and get that, and they're seeing the same effects. And the neighbor's looking at them and say, you know, they can't explain it the way I can explain it or the way you can explain it. They just say, hey, you know, I tried this and you tried this, and then they say, oh, you know, I'd like another one, and it goes like that. So like you say, how do you discount that? You know, there's no one in there putting any kind of thoughts in their head as such. They're coming up with their own conclusion based on their own experience. And that has been such a welcoming thing. This is the thing that I want to emphasize. It's been a welcoming, and that was the original intent. And so from that point, it's a success.
Did you use pure zinc plasmatic water in the bottles, or do you have a mixture in it?
Oh, no, because I've had the two mixtures, I put two bottles. And I've been trying to keep them separate just so that I have a versatility. So I actually used, because I've had the two mixtures, the one mixture is with the CO2, and the other mixture is with the copper and the zinc mixture is in the second one. So I've actually put two big bottles and two small bottles in the system, and I just tied them together with rubber bands, and that was how. Basically, a little glass bottle with a cork stopper. Put that in, and that's it, and it works right away. So
you said that in order, I would like to try this. You said that you had copper and, was it copper and CO2 you had in a mixture?
Yes. Yes, the copper and the zinc was in one mixture. The carbon dioxide is in another mixture. I actually draw the water. I was drawing the water directly from the reactor bottles. So I use a pipette to pull like a squeeze thing to pull the water out and transfer the water. I'm trying to be careful not to agitate the GANs when I do that, and then I top it up with more distilled water. But I try not to disturb the GANs too much.
Yes, but I didn't. Maybe I'm a little heavy-headed, but I didn't get the ratios you used for head, and I guess you used the same mixture. The two types you have, you use the same mixture for the little and the big bottle.
Yes, that's correct.
Yeah.
Okay, so let me just repeat that. So in one bottle I have the zinc and the copper. In the second bottle I just have the CO2. That mixture is in two big bottles. Same mixture is in two small bottles. So and the mixtures are separate. So I just have the two bottles held together with a rubber band side by side, and I put the small bottles at the head and the big bottles at the feet.
Was it a 50-50 ratio between the zinc and the CO2? Or
I just used the plasma water. I just filled up the bottles. So the one bottle is bigger than the other bottle. That was the point.
Alex?
Yes?
Just something to try on those bottles. You say you've got zinc and copper and bottle and a CO2 bottle which you put together. And
Right.
they will be the small ones, hey? And then you've done the same for the bigger bottles.
Right.
What you need to do is to alternate those. So you have a small zinc at the bottom and a big zinc at the top.
Yeah,
No.
that is.
Oh, that is the right.
It is, yes.
Oh, it is right.
Yes.
Yes.
But left and right. Yeah, left and right.
No, then it's right.
Then it's,
Sorry.
yeah, but when you place them, you must place them left and right so that they're opposite. Yes.
Yes, that's what I meant to say. Sorry.
Because we've on our health unit we've got this kind of left and right opposite type of a scenario with the top and bottom flow, which Mr. Keshe had explained to me what to do to make the health unit stronger, and it's really increased the flow. So let's say if your zinc is on the left at the bottom, it must be on the right at the top.
Okay.
And vice versa. You know what I mean?
I was primarily looking at the size of the bottles to get the flow back from the extremities back to the heads to complete the...
That's right. But to create your kind of a loop, you need to sort of alternate the sides. I can just show you, if Jimmy will stop sharing, I'll show you. Photo here. Oh. There we go. So if you see this unit, what we had here was two halves of this rack that is holding up the rings. So Mr. Keshe explained to me that if I take each of those halves and at the bottom, I would do half with CH3 1 times strong, and the other half would have 3 times strong. So it would be a 3-to-1 ratio of a half a circle of CH3 and another half a circle of CH3. And then on the top, you're creating 2 halves of copper, also 3-to-1, but then the opposite, if you get my meaning of the strong and the weak. So the strong is opposite. There's a strong at the bottom and a weak on the top, and a strong on the top and a weak at the bottom. So you're creating a kind of infinity loop. And in between are all the zinc and CO2 rings, and that is now what's creating this pulse effect and this flow. So it creates the infinity loop in between, which literally does something like that. if you know what I mean. It's a bit crude there, but that is it will help to create that flow effect if you're looking at the bottle configuration as well in terms of left, right, right, left.
And you still have one drop of the top into the bottom to make the coupling, right?
Yes, just a drop in each so that it can link. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what you're saying is in the one bottle to put in, say, 3 drops of copper and 1 drop of zinc?
In yours, you might not need it, you know, because you're creating with your reactor there a flow of all those fields. So my thinking is you've got all those fields in that water anyway.
Well, I
so close.
The way I just want to differentiate one thing. If I take the bottles and I put them on the 4 posts of the bed, let's say. So let's say put the zinc on the left and the carbon on the right, and then at the head, reverse that. Put the carbon on the left and the zinc on the right.
Yeah.
But in both cases, in my opinion, the big bottles should be at the foot and the small bottles be at the head. Are you saying to reverse that?
I don't know, Alex. I wouldn't surmise. I would probably say yes, because to me, when we've worked on reflexology points in the feet, it's a very strong flow through the feet. So I think you can initiate, and I think what it does is it just creates a continual loop anyway. So I'm not quite sure whether you need to worry so much even which is the small and which is the big. I think it's just going to flow continuously from an initiation point anyhow. So.
Yeah, that's a great point, and I like that. If I could just ask a question, you brought something up. He was mentioning to put CH3, but if someone has cancer, it's my understanding that the CH3 is not advisable to put in that system.
The answer to that question when he was asked was, you don't have cancer in your toe. So
You don't have what?
You don't have cancer in your toe usually. So it was a case of what it's doing is it's initializing the energy in the fields. So it's, and I don't, you know, to me it's because when you're standing in that unit, the main driver of the unit is the CO2 and the zinc in the rings. So the top and bottom is really just to initialize. And also what you find is when you are right that the stuff comes from the ground in a sense, or whether it's the ground or your feet, I'm not quite sure. But the energy grid from the ground is definitely a factor. And this is what Mr. Keshe said, is that if you can't position your unit on a specific ground point, you can then use the CH3 to initialize the flow. And you could even use CH3 on the top as well. You don't have to use copper at the top. So it allows for that flowing up and down motion. And what the body is really enveloped in is the CO2 and zinc fields. So with our unit, the one on the floor and the one right at the top is much above the head. And so it's just initiating the fields up and down.
I got it. So I have a big question for you. The center point of the reactor, the way I have shown it, it was my intention down the road to put a CH3 bottle in the middle of it. I've been reluctant to do that simply because of the health issues that we're having, and I didn't want to add that. I just wanted to stay with the 3 Ganses. What do you think about putting a CH3 bottle in the middle of the reactor, so having a 7th bottle?
My feeling is if you did it, but with a very small amount, because when you look at the ratios of the CH3, I think that a small amount would be good, nothing too big. So I would just do a very small little bottle with a small amount of GANs in relation to the rest of the amounts that you've got. You know, because when you look at taking any of the GANSes in a combination of a good basic mixture, your CH3 is a small factor.
Okay, so it wouldn't affect negatively to someone who has cancer?
If it's a small factor, you know, if it's sort of a 5% or something, it wouldn't, to me, it wouldn't do anything. You know, when you're looking at, I don't know if you looked at the Knowledge Seeker workshop Thursday a week ago, when Klaus came and showed his little device with the readings of different vitamins and organs and things like this.
Yes.
And he had mentioned there, which I need to dig into further, that he had given CH3 and it had balanced vitamins. Now that I found quite fascinating. To give somebody CH3 and it can balance your vitamin levels.
Okay.
So that wasn't something, he just said it by the by, and I found that quite interesting. He didn't say, oh, I gave them plasmatic vitamins and it changed their vitamins. He said, I gave them CH3 and it changed their vitamin level.
Yeah, I was just worried about contributing excess energy to a cancer tumor.
Yeah, as I say, I'm not too sure. As long as it's only very small amounts, it wouldn't be a problem, because your body in any event is using small amounts of energy. And when you look at the cancer usually has a seed, and that seed is a mineral or a metal, and that is what you need to pull out. So I'm not sure.
Well, I've stayed with this configuration just to kind of be on the safe side, but I have definitely thought of putting the CH3 in the middle, because I know that would increase the force field of the reactor.
Why don't you just put it in and give it a day and let the fields build up, and then just assess it. You will know yourself whether it's right or wrong.
And yeah, that's a good suggestion. Thanks, Jim.
You've got to go with your gut feel.
Yeah, where I'm at is that we have the highest rate of cancer per capita up here, and that's been one of the things that I've been looking at. So I've tried to stay as vanilla and as possible, with a heavy emphasis on the zinc, though, because of the emotional aspect of it, and that, I think, is where the success has been most prevalent.
And I really think that it's, by allowing people to drink this water, it's going to do them good. It really is, because even speaking to a group the other day, just a group of people we've initialized here in Australia, and some new member had come in and for the workshop, and just him piping up near the end and saying, I've been drinking CO2 for the last 6 months, and I have been diagnosed with this. He mentioned the name. It was what he calls like an old people's leukemia, what he called. And he said, it's progressive, and my immune system gets worse and worse and worse. And I've had it for a long time, and nothing's ever changed, and it's just gotten progressively worse. And I've been drinking this CO2 water for 6 months. And the last time I went for my checkup, my doctor was most amazed to see that my immune levels are much improved. And it's the first time he's ever seen a patient with improved immune levels with this type of problem. So whatever you're doing, is going to help. Even if it's just the basic CO2, it's already a help. So
definitely.
It's one can only just soldier along and try the best you can, and somehow, somewhere, people hear, they try, and you get feedback many months later down the line as to what's really what an effect you've had on people.
Actually, I would like to positively and pleasantly report that since April the 18th, this has been a tremendous positive reaction. I have not had any negative reaction to that. So they always have the option. They can go to their grocery store or the convenience store and buy a bottle of water for twice the price and enjoy the tap water in a bottle too. So everybody's free. Everybody's free to do whatever they want. Yeah. So there.
That's come for free.
You are free. Thanks so much, gang.
All right, thanks, Alex. Any other questions for Alex?
There was one issue about the water. I don't know if this is something you use, but we have started drinking distilled water. And the water quality in Denmark is quite good because we don't need to clean the water from a lot of chemicals. Of course, there is a bit of chemicals in the water, but the levels are very low in Denmark. So we started to drink distilled water, and the effect of that is that the build-up of material in the blood vessels is stopping, and in 2 years you have clean vessels. I don't know if you are aware of that.
I have a strong opinion on that.
Okay.
I would use the distilled water exclusively for making plasma water.
Yes.
The distilled water is a known plant killer. Okay, let's put it this way. I agree with you. I was drinking distilled water for quite a while. This is going back several decades, and the whole purpose of it was to do no harm. You know, as opposed to drinking the chemical swill that's coming out of the tap. Yeah, the distilled water is better, but it is devoid of minerals. And the thing is, it does demineralize you. So you have to take the distilled water in conjunction with the supplemental vitamins and minerals. But the fundamental point of drinking the distilled water is to do no harm. But in a long process, it does, because it drains you of these other minerals. So what I've been able to achieve with this is one of the things I wanted was to have a mineral content in the water, but I didn't want a active mineral. I just wanted the basic mineral water. So I was drawing the water from the tap, and I was using ionized water, so that the positive and negative ions are rendered inert. And so they don't activate there, and also so as not to have a sediment in the bottle. So the bottles that I'm producing are clean. There's no sediment in the bottom. There's no GANs in the bottom. They've just the energy is just transferred from the reactor to the bottles, and so I've gone that way. So I'm using distilled water exclusively in the creation of the plasma water within the GANs bottles themselves. So I use it to flush out the caustic, I use it to flush out the salt, and I use it to energize the plasma bottles, the original reactor bottles. But I wouldn't, otherwise I wouldn't advise to drink distilled water from that standpoint, from a long-term health standpoint. But,
yeah, I would agree with you there, Alex. Basic distilled water with nothing in it is not good for you. As a plasma water, perfect.
I don't know, have you ever watered?
Pardon?
Sorry, Lisa. Have you ever, have you watered plants with distilled water?
I haven't. It's too expensive.
Well, actually, it's a plant killer. It will.
Okay.
Your plants will die within a matter of weeks.
But I mean, it makes sense, because if it has no fields in it, it will pull fields out, because the stronger feeds the weaker.
There you go.
So it's weakening your fields. So if it's just devoid of anything, it's the same as if you've got a very dry climate and you've got a plant that doesn't have any, isn't given extra water. It will shrivel up and die, because its water is now feeding the outside, because it is strong with water, and it's transpiring to push the water out to the weaker. So I wouldn't suggest drinking plain distilled water. If it's plasmatic water, sure, but not just plain distilled water, no. I mean, we do rainwater, because that's what we collect here, is filtered rainwater, because that's how we don't even have town water or a well. So. But to me, at least, the rainwater has fields in it, which is probably pretty healthy.
Yeah, I don't know what to say about this. The information here I got from my friend, the health practitioner, and he has 50 years of experience, and he is a very observing man. He, as I mentioned before, he has had around 500,000 consultations in his time, and he's very, very sharp at observing effects of something. And he hasn't mentioned any problems to me about this, but I agree that the distilled water should be plasmatic, and with the amount of gases we have in the house here now, it's impossible to have non-plasmatic water, I think. So
that's all our problem.
But what he mentions is that the problems with build-up in the blood vessels, that disappears using distilled water. And I think that is very important. And the other thing I think should be a question to either Paul or Mr. Keshe, because the bones are a factory, and the body balances itself if possible. So I think there must be something to this. If there wasn't a balancing mechanism in the body, there would be a lot of very problematic diseases, different places on Earth, because some stuff is missing several places. And I also wonder if this effect is age dependent, that we with age loses the ability to make these things the body needs.
What I think is happening, Eric, is that, yes, some of it is genetic, where you live and where you come from and how your body's been designed over years to absorb. But if we start understanding, all the health practitioners, everybody up until now has, everything is down to how the body and the physical body does things and creates. And so everybody's very hooked on this nutrition and that nutrition. Yet, if you look at some of these guys living on the 4 basic gases, they're not taking vitamin supplements. What we've got to understand is that the fields that we create from our soul strength that come through the emotional filters is what keeps our physical body going. And over time, with age and with our emotional distress that we feel on this planet and the conditioning we have to believe that at a certain age, certain things happen, this is how we degrade. This is how we end up degrading ourselves physically with the blockage, emotional blockages. This is what causes the blocked arteries, the high blood pressure, it's all an emotional thing, and it's not a physical root. And so to just look at all these physical things that all the traditional, even if it is the herbal guys, and that they understand it from a physical point of view, but that's not the root of it. The root of it is definitely emotional. And if we can just get the zinc fields in, that's why Mr. Keshe is so adamant of getting the zinc fields into us. It's going to change everything fundamentally. The aging process, the health process, everything.
Yes, I agree. I'm trying to lose weight with some mixture that I got from Paul, and I don't lose weight that fast, as fast as Paul did when he did the same to himself. And I think it's also it must be something about the emotion you have to direct yourself in order to lose weight fast. But what he said also is that the aging process is slowing down or stopped when you do this. And that is quite amazing. And of course, I have to gain more experience in this aspect, but I think it's amazing that you are able to stop the aging. And even there's also I know there is a possibility to repair DNA and RNA also, but I don't know how to do it, but I know it exists.
The only thing you need is the CO2 and the zinc, Eric, and just carry on with your plasmas, and it will. You're only as old as you think you are, and that's true. I'm starting to look ever so slightly younger as I'm going along, and it's only because when I look in the mirror, I see myself as 30 again, and I'm going to get myself to that point again. So you really need to. It's an attitude adjustment and an emotional adjustment. That's all. And drinking all that lovely plasma water.
Yes.
Can I add something?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting thing is, we are distressed about the number of plastic bottles that we're producing. So really, what I'm doing is I'm not creating more plastic bottles. I'm taking existing plastic bottles and converting them to plasma water. But they are new and they are clean. So now I'm getting a whole host of people bringing me bags of plastic bottles, and I mean bags of it. I have hundreds of plastic bottles coming back to me, and so these are all used bottles, and I'm trying to figure out what to do with them. And all the time I've said, you know, plants and puppy dogs don't lie. So that was one of the reasons that I sent the last 3 pictures with the plants, with the peace lily and whatnot. This is a response from the plants. You know, again, they don't have the legs and they don't have the political constrictions that we have, political correctness. They respond, and I thought I was showing some really good pictures there of plants that are very, very happy, that have been residing in the plasmatic field. And then me personally, I'm sitting in here with at least 8 hours a day within the reactor. So what I've noticed, me personally, is that I'm not eating as much and I'm not drinking as much. I don't really need to do that because I'm getting the benefit of the plasmatic field. But that's me. That's not my customers. My customers, they come in and you know, they need the water to supplement, you know, for their benefit. But I had to figure out what to do with these plastic bottles. And because they're used, I don't want to use them for people. So what I've been doing is sterilizing them, using them for dogs. And dogs don't lie. So, you know, I'm seeing results with dogs, health-wise, in 24, 48 hours, you know, less than 2 weeks anyway. And so I've now had an opportunity and figured out what to do with recycling these other bottles. And because, again, dogs don't have the political interference you know, they don't express the opinions. We have just gone through a summer where we have problems with blue-green algae in the adjoining waterways around here because of the phosphate contents and then the pollution and everything else. And then dogs go swimming in that water, and you know, guess what? They cannot digest their food. So we've been using the plasma water to help them recover with that. And you know, the proof is in the pudding, I guess. So I have happy customers, and then you can always tell a happy customer when they wag their tail.
Thanks, Alex.
Thank you.
All right, we've gone on quite a bit now. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to go on to the end of what I wanted to talk about, and I'll do all the other bits next time. So this is the homework part that I would like some of you to think about and come up with an answer. Now, crown shyness, I've got the definition from Wikipedia. It's canopy shyness, intercrowning spacing. So it's a phenomenon observed in some tree species in which the crowns of fully stocked trees do not touch each other, forming a canopy with channel-like gaps. The phenomenon is most prevalent among trees of the same species, but also occurs between trees of different species. And there exist many hypotheses as to why crown shyness is an objective behavior, and research suggests that it might inhibit spread of leaf-eating insect larvae. So, to give you an idea of what crown shyness is, I'll wait for that picture to come through. Oh, internet is very slow. Here we go. So there's a picture of trees, and as you can see, right at the top, with the canopy of the leaves and the branches, they don't touch each other. So you're seeing those white gaps, that's the sky. So the trees do not touch each other at all. There's another two examples coming up. So there's the same example again. Is that there's a distinct definition between the trees. They just do not want to touch each other. Whereas in a natural forest, you just don't get those gaps because everything is just growing. So it's very particular to certain trees. So that's the homework, is to try and explain this from a plasma perspective as to why this is happening. And so I will end today on that question for us to think about for next week as to why that should occur. And so I think we'll call it an end for today, and I'd just like to thank Alex very much for his presentation, because I think she's showing a very simple way that we can use this GANS material and how we can turn it into its own reactor. And it's a perfect example of the field interaction between the different GANSes without us having to stick on any motors to start spinning and this and that. So it's something that we can all do at home. And thank you very much for that, Alex. It's very, very valuable for all of us.
Thank you again for giving me the opportunity to do that.
No, it's our pleasure. All right, so we'll see you again in 2 weeks' time, on the 24th of September. Once again, thank you very much, Alex. Thank you for everybody else participating.
Thanks, everybody.